What is up, guys? This is Dennis Fields and welcome back to Cityscape Brewing. Today I've got a really cool video for you guys because I've been working on this project for a little while. I've been trying to come up with a DIY version of a hop drop or a hop charge, right? You've all seen those. They're the tri-clamp type systems with the glass outer portion that you put hops inside. And once your beer is finished, you can purge that of oxygen. You can open up that valve and let those hops fall right into your beer. But there's two problems, right? First, most of us don't use shiny conical fermenters, and the price of those things can be somewhere upwards of $200 to $300 to $400 or more, depending on how many hops you want to put in one of those things. Well, I have the solution, and you can also use it with a bucket, a Fermenter, a big mouth bubbler, or any other non-conical fermenter you want with a lid. I'm going to show you how to do that for about 25 to 30 bucks. Right after you hit that like and subscribe button, grab yourself a beer, and we're gonna get after it. So I've been kind of thinking about this, brainstorming for a while on how you can make a DIY version of these, especially for relatively inexpensive, right? Because you can buy the hop drop type of things and maybe put on some type of tri-clamp connection on top of your bucket, but that's also going to be really expensive. So I was trying to think of a way where you could still purge your hops of oxygen while still being able to open those things up and drop them in without having any issue. As most of you have seen in my previous videos, I use a paint strainer bag that I sanitize, I put hops in, and I use those sous vide magnets, and I attach it to the side of the fermenter. And that works in a pinch. But what if you don't have enough headspace in your fermenter to do that? And a lot of you don't, or especially if it's a bucket, right? Maybe you're filling that thing up so much that all you really have room for is the krausen. Well, I have a solution for you. And we're gonna go through the parts that you'll need, relatively inexpensive items that you can get at the hardware store or easily on Amazon. And I'm gonna have all of the items linked in the video description below just for you guys. For this demonstration, I'm gonna be using my Fermenter. So in this case, I'm gonna use a lid that doesn't have a hole on the top of it. And so a lot of times when you get these, they have a giant hole in the middle where you can put a bung and an airlock, right? So you can purchase a solid lid like this one that you can manipulate yourself. Again, I'll have a link to this in the video description below. Or you can use a different type of fermenter, right? So you could use a bucket lid if you have one of those. You can use an all-rounder lid. You can use a big mouth bubbler lid or any type of fermenter that you have, as long as you can fit the size holes that we're gonna be drilling in the top. No matter what lid that you are using, you're gonna need the following extra items. First, you're gonna need a valve. In this case, I'm using a 3/4 threaded to 3/4 threaded PVC valve, right? And so this will allow a large opening for hops to get through in the middle, but still have areas where we can screw something to the top and to the bottom. So both sides are threaded at 3/4 of an inch. In order to attach that to the lid, we're going to be needing a connection piece like this. This is gonna have 3/4 threaded on one side to a 3/4 slip in on this side. Next, we're gonna need something for the hops to sit in, and I thought this would be an excellent idea. These are actually meant for protein powders that have an unscrewable bottom. Normally you'd open up the big lid here, you'd dump some protein powder or something like that before you go to the gym. You'd throw it in your gym bag, and then when you get there, there's a smaller side of these that goes inside of a bottle. But this actually works as a really great funnel for what we're gonna be using. So we're gonna be taking off the cap side on the bottom, putting that off to the side because we're not gonna be using it. We're just gonna be using it like this. Next, you're going to need some silicone washers. These here are food grade, and they're going to be what keeps the air locked between our valve here and the lid. And you'll need a large grommet. So these are the black grommets that you normally see on top of a bucket fermenter. So we're gonna go through the whole process of putting this together and how it works right now. You can also now join as a channel member, which means you get member perks. That means you get my videos as I drop them early, and you're gonna have members only recipes that are only available if you hit that join button below, become a member, and help support the channel. Cheers. When I started putting together the design, I realized that when I screw this all the way in, there's not a whole lot of room for me to squeeze my small lid right here between this before it gets fully tight. because as you screw this in, it actually becomes narrower as you go towards the inside of the valve. And so I'm gonna need to probably shave off a little bit of these threads using a hacksaw. So what I did is I actually hacksawed off a small portion of the threading, about a third or so of that. This will allow us to thread this thing on a lot tighter so we get a better connection between our lid and our nut at the bottom here. Next, we're going to need to go ahead and drill a few holes into our lid here for our rubber grommet and for our PVC threading to go through the bottom of our lid. To do that, I'm going to be using a 1/2-inch drill bit to just drill a hole on the side of my lid. The reason we're going to do it over here is to make room for our airlock, but not get in the way of an area that we need towards the center that we're going to need for the larger valve. If you notice on the inside, there's a couple of ridges, and I'm going to try to avoid those because I won't be able to screw this down tight if it's touching one of these ridges that's on the middle of the lid here, or you don't want to get too close to the lid where it seals on the outside. That would stop it from sealing fully on the outside. So I'm going to try to get somewhere in the middle here for my grommet hole, and then I'm going to put this just off center to make sure that I have enough ways to screw this down towards the middle of the circle here. For the middle hole, we're going to be using a 1-inch spade bit because that's going to fit perfectly where that threading piece is without being too large to let air escape. All right, now we have our 1/2-inch hole drilled in the lid right here. This is going to be for our rubber grommet that we will put inside of there in just a moment. Let's go ahead and drill the 1-inch hole towards the center here, and I'm going to flip that over again and make sure that we're getting far enough away again from that ridge that's on the inside of this lid. After you get done drilling the holes, you can clean those up with a little bit of sandpaper on both holes, and I would suggest doing that also on the threaded portion here without sanding too much so you don't ruin the threads. And that's it. All we have to do now is start assembling our pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the rubber grommet. For this, there is a small groove that goes along the inside of this thing. You're just going to have to go ahead and work that in one side and then slowly work it around the other sides to make sure that it gets all the way in there. It is a tight fit, but that's where you want it. So you make sure that that is airtight all the way around. Work that in. It should fit in like so. And to snug it up, you can actually use one of your airlocks and just stick that in there. Make sure it fits. And you can tell it fits like a glove. Next, we're going to take one of our silicone washers and put it on the outside of the threading like so. Then we're going to slowly stick it in or start screwing it in if it's tight through our lid. Now on this side, we're going to go ahead and start threading on our other silicone washer and the valve. Now you should have something that looks a little like this. Make sure when you're screwing on the valve portion that it's away from where we're going to be having our airlock at the ending position. Now the only thing we need to do is put on our funnel. For this, it's less important that this is completely airtight because the valve is what's going to be holding out most of the oxygen most of the time. For instance, you can see that there is a hole all the way through this right now, but when you turn this, there is a rubber gasket and another valve that closes this, and this will become airtight. When this is in the closed position, it's going to push out your CO2 that's in your airlock right here. When you open this even slightly to let out a little bit of CO2, this will release the pressure in your airlock here, and it will allow the CO2 to start escaping through the valve here. So there's no need to take this portion off. Let's do that again. So what we're going to do with our funnel is actually just start screwing it on. And you can get this really tight because, again, as these threads go into this, it actually gets smaller, which will squeeze and tighten this funnel down perfectly, even though they're not exactly the same thread size. So we're gonna get this screwed down until it's snug. But again, it's not necessary for this to be completely airtight, because when we are done with the dry hop and before the dry hop, we will have this valve in the closed position. So I'm going to show you a little demonstration on how this is going to work. When you are ready to pitch your yeast, you're going to go ahead and do that, and then you're going to screw on the lid as it's kind of shown here. You're going to have your airlock in place, you're going to have your valve and your funnel on the top, and you're going to have this valve all the way to closed, so completely closed, right? That thing is going to prevent any air or CO2 from coming up or going down this tube into your fermenter. This will start the airlock action like normal, as if this is really not doing anything at the time. So we're getting close to the dry hop, but we're not quite done with the fermentation activity. We want there to be some bubbling action still going on in our airlock. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove the lid. Again, this isn't going to let in oxygen because the valve on this is closed, okay? But even if we crack this a little bit, which we're going to do, it's still going to be purging this with CO2. That's why it's important to do this during active fermentation. So what we're going to do is we're going to very carefully look inside of this, and we're going to slowly crank this thing open just a little tiny crack, just enough to let some CO2 in. So inside, you can kind of tell there's a small area where we have turned this just enough where CO2 can escape inside of this, but it will not let hops inside of our fermenter. So for this example, I'm not going to be using hops. I'm going to be using some popcorn. This can hold several ounces of hops inside of this cone, so we're going to go ahead and fill it up. Now, we're going to go ahead and loosely put on this cap. So we're going to go all the way down, and before it starts getting real tight, we're going to let this be loose on the top. So now, because this is loose, it's actually going to break this connection. So there's no airlock activity that's going to happen in our airlock anymore. We're going to actually have some CO2 escaping up into here and purging our hops of oxygen. And so this is going to actually just release for a short period of time. It's going to release some CO2 out of this lid because it's loose. Eventually, when we get closer to the dry hop portion, I would say after a good 12 hours or so of purging this of oxygen, I would go ahead and tighten this lid back down, right? So we're going to go ahead and tighten this down, and you could even shut off your valve again if you want to. This will make sure that there's CO2 only inside of the funnel, that you've purged all the oxygen out of your hops here, and then you'll see the CO2 action happening again here. So you can do this right away and start the purging right away and then close it, or you can do it towards the end of fermentation, doesn't really matter. Now comes the fun part. After fermentation activity is done and you're ready to dry hop, or if it's a hazy IPA and you're ready to dry hop at high Krausen, you're going to go ahead and just open this valve and let our hops fall through. So I'm actually using my Fermenter right now to brew in, so I can't use that as an example right away, but I am going to be showing you on a clear carboy like this one. This is a big mouth bubbler. I could have also done the same process with this style lid here, as long as I put the bung with a stopper in there and then drilled a different hole for our valve. Now, depending on what style of fermenter that you have, there are baskets that you can put inside of here to catch the hops. The Big Mouth Bubbler has one, and the Fermenter also has one called the Fermenter Strainer. So I'll open that up and show you what that looks like. It's essentially a hop bag that falls into your fermenter like this, and then the lid of the Fermenter holds this in place. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of demonstrate how this would work if it were actually on the Fermenter. Now, when it's dry hop day, all we have to do is then open up our valve and let our hops fall right into place. Sometimes you just need to give it a little friendly nudge and they fall right into place. Now we have the hops inside of our beer doing their magic. We can go ahead and close off this again, and if you wanted to, you could even take off this funnel at that time. Then the airlock activity should start happening again in your airlock, or if it's after fermentation, it'll be completely sealed off again. Then when we go to siphon this, all of our hops are inside of our strainer here, and it will not get any gunk inside of our keg. All right, guys, there you got it. For 10% of the cost of a hop drop or hop charge, we have our own DIY version of a hop charge that you can do with any style fermenter that you like. Again, I'll have all of the equipment that we used and all of the directions in the video description below, so you guys can go ahead and make your own. But I need everybody to hit that like and subscribe, and if you found this video helpful, share it with your friends. I appreciate each and every one of you guys. Happy brewing, and cheers. Hey, thanks for watching my video. I really do appreciate it. A way you can support the channel is just by buying me a beer. There's a button right there on the screen, and there's a link in the video description below. You can also check out the merchandise in our store, and you can hit the video on the screen right now. You know you want to.